and empower women to pursue an excellent sales career by filling the gender gap to live to the fullest of her potential and to achieve financial independence. I will be interviewing amazing successful women sales leaders and CEOs from India and around the globe where we discuss their sales journey, their challenges, their wins, and much more. So, today our guest is Margye Solomon. I will give you a little introduction about her, then she'll be explaining in detail about her journey, and I'll be eager to listen her story journeys because it's just not 5 years, 10 years. We are going to discuss overall 30 plus years of experience in sales. So about her, so right now she's head of business development in Envision. Well, we will also discuss with her what is Envision, what she's doing on that. Then a contributing writer at Diversity Professional. Then advisory board member in Harmony Fields, Nashville. Supplier inclusion business development consultant at Cisco. So these are all her current you know activities what she does, but she have n number of experience, not only as a uh, working women, as well as she has done a lot of volunteering activity. I could see volunteer leadership team advisor at Elevate Network, and committee chair member in Vision 2020 Equality Insight. So like that, there are so many n number of volunteer experiences as well. She is doing a lot of volunteering work. So we will be discussing in detail about her experience and also experience at volunteering work. Welcome, Margye. It's honor to have you here.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Hi. So, first and foremost, I would like to understand. I'm sure my audience also want to understand. How all this started, the sales journey. I know that time it must be very challenging for women to get into sales.
It was. It was. I actually started my my career in sales. I worked in group sales at a theme park called Opryland, USA. But I really didn't go into sales thinking, oh yes, I'm going to be in sales. I was a psych major in college, took a course called The Psychology of Sales, and I loved it. And so it got me out of thinking about just going into psychology to be a therapist, but using what I'd learned in psych, and then of course what I had learned in college, because I had been on stage acting since I was about 8 years old, and had gone to college on a theater league scholarship. But it led me to believe that I could use all of that in uh, promotions and marketing and yes, sales um, moving forward.
Okay. Okay. So, like, did you face any challenges? I'm sure it's not that easy journey for you over 30 years in sales. So, was there any challenges, at least specific ones, if you would like to share?
Well, my first job at um, I experienced sexual harassment, and later on I experienced it again. And then, of course, there was always getting promoted because I was a woman, and a lot of the time I was the only woman in the room. When I was in the travel industry, there were a lot of women who were travel agents, but there weren't a lot of women who who were in higher positions or owned agencies and that type of thing. So I did promotions in the music industry. Um, so kind of the newer generations, I guess, are finding out what records are again, what vinyl is. But with Spotify and all of the online streaming services, they don't know that back in the olden days, in the 70s, people went to work for record labels to get records played on the radio. And I was one of only a handful of women who were actually promotion people in the music business in the 70s. And there weren't many of us. Uh, there was a lot going on. It was kind of like working in a locker room, lots of jokes. And I don't think women today would actually deal with that. It was fun. I was included. I never felt when I worked there that, you know, that that my colleagues were against me. But I made less than half of what they did, and I was always thought of as a secretary. So I've got a really good story about um, having an advocate when I was in the music business, but I'll save that for when you ask me about.
Okay. Okay. See, you just mentioned, sexual harassment, all this. Even I know women to get into sales. This is also one of the barrier. They think, okay, this is risky for a woman. Women will be not safe. What advice do you want to give?
Well,
If at all they face such, I'm sure it may not be same
um,
at that
I mean,
time,
it
if
wasn't
at all it is.
unsafe. You know, I had a lot of people who looked out for me. Fortunately, in the jobs that I had where there was sexual harassment, um, I quit and I went somewhere else. I just didn't put up with it. Um, so it's you know um, at one point when I was in the music business, I was in my office, my boss was there, and I had a music director come in and grab me in you know not in a great place, and right in my office, everybody was there, and he had an appointment with my boss, and I walked back into my boss's office, and I said, well, this particular music director just grabbed my chest, and he was furious and stood up for me, and you know it could have cost us a lot if that particular music director had gotten really upset by him, you know, um, because he represented a large station. But back in the day, you just took those things in stride, and if it was really bad, you left, and if you didn't have anybody to stand up for you, you left, and you went somewhere else. But safety, one of the reasons women didn't get into sales was because if they had families, there's a lot of travel involved. There's a lot of time away from home. There's a lot of hours involved, and a lot of time it's not necessarily 9 to 5 or 8 to 6 or whatever you're working, and I think those things kept women out of sales for a long time because um, it was difficult if you had a family and no support to be able to be successful and go out and do that.
Was there any challenges to move to the next level in your career, leadership role, career in sales? Are there?
And it was always a challenge. In the music business, I never
Okay.
really got one. I did the work, but I never got the recognition for it from within my company, and I didn't make any more money. When I got into the music business, excuse me, into the travel industry, I was working at an agency, and I was up for promotion, and I was pregnant at the time and getting ready to go out on maternity. Um, and I interviewed for the job, and I was already pretty much managing um, the area, and the man that ran the agency promoted a guy. There was one male on our team, and he hadn't been there as long as I had, didn't have the experience I had, and he got promoted because I was pregnant. And they couldn't wait 6 weeks or 8 weeks for me to come back to work.
Okay.
So I left.
I'm also getting such comments from many young women. No, they are really performing well, outperformance, but they're not getting the titles, the deserving ones. So, what do you want to
I
say to
think
that?
How do you
that
conclude this situation?
it all really goes back to, I was doing a little bit of research about the first women in sales, and there were women in sales in the 1800s and the 20s. Um, uh, it was direct sales, like, there was a woman who started Bissell actually and sold vacuum cleaners door to door to help her family. Um, uh, and there were like four women who actually became multimillionaires back before you know women became multimillionaires. They couldn't even vote basically, back in those days. So, but I found an article from 1984 called "Birth of the Saleswoman" by a woman named Marta Vogel, and just the percentages. So from 1972 to 1981, the percentage of women working as wholesale trade reps increased 153%, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. 1984, an estimated 15% of the professional direct sales force were women. The first companies to begin hiring women actually started in the 80s, believe it or not. And it's really, for some people that seems like ancient history, but it's not that long ago that women were beginning to be hired and promoted into sales positions. And there's a company called Morgan and Brother Manhattan Storage, and they were male dominated, and they began hiring outside saleswomen in 1982. So, women in sales, yeah, women have been selling for a long time, but one of the reasons that they didn't go into sales was, this study that Ms. Vogel did, was that the image of the salesperson was of some dreadful combination of Avon calling and Willie Loman dying. And this was a gentleman named David King, who was the founder of Careers for Women back in the 80s. So everything sort of germinated and started to bubble up back in the 80s. But, women face the same issues then that they do today. They just didn't have as much support. I mean, things hadn't come to where they are today. But a lot of women, a lot of men, and companies are hesitant to put women in sales for the same reasons that they were back then. if they're married, if they have children, if they don't have children and they're not married, but they might have children and they might get married, it's all the same reasons that it was back then. They're not going to be able to do this. Even when they are working and outperforming, they start getting to a place where, oh my God, they're going to get married and they're going to start to have children and they're going to be gone and their performance is going to suffer and yada, yada, yada. So that's basically one of the reasons that it's tough for women to get promoted. Still.
Any suggestions or ideas do you want to give to women who are facing such issues, like they're not getting titles, promotions? Like, for example, they
You
have to
do,
speak
you
out
do, and you
to
have to be able to
management.
negotiate what's happening. Sometimes you negotiate your job, but you do have to speak out. Um, uh, my secret sauce and what I think helps a lot is if you find a mentor and a sponsor within the company that you're working for or outside of the company that you're working for. Because what happens is when you have a mentor or really more so a sponsor, an advocate for you, they're going to sing your praises inside and outside of the company. So they can help you get seen and known by those people who you need to see you and know you, in different departments or, in leadership of the company. But it also gets you known in your industry and outside of your own company because, it may come to a point where you're not going to get promoted there, you're not going to get the kind of money you want, but you've got a reputation now, and you can go out and sort of name your price because people are going to be wanting you. They sort of hear that you're unhappy and ready to go, and then you start getting offers. So finding that sponsor inside or outside of your company is, I think, probably the best thing that you could do for yourself.
I want to understand women in sales evolution from 80s, 90s till now. How do you see that time and now?
Understand that it's not what they thought it was back in the back in the 80s. Before the 80s, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, you know, really World War II, more women started working outside the home, and that was in the 40s. So women working outside the home was sort of an anomaly before World War II. I mean, they did in World War One. There were nurses, secretaries, things like that. But really, and most of them were women who worked outside the home. A lot of them were not homemakers, were not mothers, unless they had lost their husband or got divorced or something had happened. And so most of them would clean houses or take in ironing or do, way back in the day. So you didn't have a lot of women who were in sales. And it's funny, I was in a training course when I was with Avis Rent-A-Car, and they talked about selling and kind of the what people thought about sales. And so the women who taught the class talked about the oldest profession, which was women selling themselves. And I think for a long time, women in sales was distasteful for people because they were out selling, and it was distasteful. And now when the suffragist movement got women out of their homes, got them out in the streets. And, women throughout history have done what they have to do to take care of their families and protect their families when they have to. And the women I talked about, um, to a woman, um, had lost a husband, or the husband couldn't work, or they were off at war, and they had 4 or 5 kids, and they had to do something to put food on the table. So, not until the second, sort of women's revolution, which was in the 60s and 70s, did women really start to look at and move into jobs that were male oriented. Still had some of that feeling that, you know, uh, being a corporate salesperson was selling snake oil, and uh, that they were, callous and only cared about the sale and didn't care about other people. And I think, women find that distasteful. So, a lot of it had to do with women just didn't want to be in that business. They didn't want to be seen as snake oil salesmen. They didn't want to be callous. That's not everybody. You can't be a generalist about it. But, I gave you the numbers. So today, 31.6% of professional salespeople are women. From the 80s, 70s, 80s was 15%, and it's now 31.6%. That's only like a 15, 16% increase over what, 30 years, 40 years? So now 42% of direct sales people are women. And direct sales is Avon,
Yeah.
that type of thing, which moved from 41.5% in 2010 to 43, almost 44% in 2019. So direct sales, women continue to grow, but in overall professional sales, we're still only a little less than 32%. And those are new numbers, by the way, from the Department of Labor.
Margye, thanks for the statistics, what you just said. Now we have a better understanding. I would like to know from you, how do you see the job
Yes, I
opportunity
do.
for
And a
women
lot of
workforce
women
now
are
How
being
much
promoted now.
compared to
easier
that
for
And you
time
women
see a
in
now?
lot
How
of
much
VP of
1970s?
sales
is
who are
finding
women.
opportunity for
And it's
women
great. But,
right now,
that's
70s,
happened,
80s? Yes.
you know, pretty much in the 90s, in the early zips, really. Um, uh, it, it began to happen in the 80s. And women, were getting promoted because what happened was once men hired them and found that their performance was superb and probably, higher than half their male sales force, they did start to promote them. And there were women who were VP of sales, in pretty large companies. So banking was one where um, uh, women started to, finance, even though it was a very, very male-dominated industry. But so, yes, it has changed and it has gotten better. It's not great because we still don't make as much money as our male counterparts do. And I'm going to say that sales is hard. It's hard. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman or pink or blue or orange. Selling is hard. It is not easy. And it takes a particular type of person to be able to take the rejection, to
Yeah.
day after day after day after day, and the pressure. Because, as you're a salesperson, the pressure is enormous to hit your numbers. It's not, hey, I just did this and I just did that. Yeah, but what have you done for me lately? What have you done for me today? Is always the question. So now they've they've
No one
they've
Yeah,
bothers
agree to you.
you know,
I know,
people are
see, no
put
one
in buckets
bothers,
now.
what we have done
Salespeople are.
in the past.
So, there's
Everybody wants to know
there's the
what you're doing
farmer,
today
and then
and
there's
what
the
you're going to do
hunter, and there's the,
tomorrow.
you know, uh, so it has allowed people to be in a position that they're best suited to, you know, because not everybody's a hunter. So,
I
I mean,
definitely think so.
that's basically the history, and the answer to your question is yes,
Yeah,
it is
please
better
go ahead.
today for women than it was.
Maggie, do you remember the other day when we were talking about the dressing culture for women?
The dressing culture, the dressing culture for women in sales.
Oh,
You told about it.
dressing. Oh, yeah, yeah. Well,
The
um,
culture of women,
uh,
dressing culture,
in
the way they dress up.
for several years, pharmaceutical companies, different types of industries found that if they hired young, attractive women to call on doctors, um, that sales went up exponentially. And so, they were, now, that's not to say they didn't make a lot of money, because they did. But a lot of women went into pharmaceutical sales because they could make a lot of money, and uh, it it wasn't that hard. But they all wore. I don't know if you've ever been in a doctor's office in the States, but if you sit in the doctor's office, it used to be. It's a little different now, but it used to be you could sit in there and you knew the pharmaceutical reps who came in, because there was always this woman with a skirt, jacket, suit, dressed to the nines, pulling her little bag. Oh, can I see Doctor So and So? Talking to all the nurses, everything else. But and I had a lot of friends who were in pharmaceutical sales who made a fortune, um, and they were all extremely attractive. When I was at Avis, I mean, I used to costume to make my sales calls. Now I did it based
Okay.
on the culture of the company I was going to see. But there were a lot of women colleagues of mine who, you know, again, dressed nicely and well. We had a code, but wore suits, pretty short skirts, um, to make sales calls, because most of our buyers were men.
Something,
I believe dressing
it kind of
gives
gives confidence
confidence
to
to
women
women.
as well. The way she
The
dresses
way
up,
she dressed, the way
um,
she handshake with
the
the
way she,
customers,
at, talk to
the way she
men,
It
carry
does. It
herself,
does. It was
that
funny.
builds the
I had a
confidence
guy that
whether
in
it's
her.
that
attracting others or
I don't
not.
know
he
whether it
worked at a travel
But
company,
it
and
attracts
basically
others,
gives
they'd hired
but
women a
it
this
confidence.
definitely gives the
gentleman to
confidence
come
to
in
her
and
own self.
sell. And he was kind of semi-retired and adding money to his Social Security. And he was the most rumpled looking guy I have ever seen. And he was hysterical because our office was right next to a dry cleaner. And, we'd have to go on a sales call, and I'd be looking for him. And I generally knew that he was over at the dry cleaner, sitting because they did alterations, sitting in the dressing room with his slacks off, having his slacks pressed before we went on the sales call. However, I mean, his shirts were always kind of rumpled, and his tie was always askew, and he wore this raincoat that was just, I mean, and I'd go on sales calls with him, and I'd be like, oh my God. But people loved him. I mean, they absolutely loved him, and he taught me a lot about sales. when we went on those calls. But he was a guy. Uh, he didn't really care. He was there to sell travel, and talk about the corporate travel and talk about the sizzle. And he didn't know anything about it. That's why I was there to talk to actually talk about what we did and how we did it. But he got us in the door, and you know he used to bring all of the receptionists candy. And I learned that when I had a sales call, I always brought the receptionists and the secretaries something. I mean, I never went empty-handed. And it wasn't for the person I was calling on, it was for the support staff.
Wow, that's great. First time I'm hearing that you're giving gift to the supporting staff. Why do you do that?
An appointment, right,
Somebody's
in person.
getting the gift for
And
his or her team.
it may have taken you forever to get
Why do
this
you do that?
appointment because
What's
you
the
have to
reason
get through
behind
all
it?
the gatekeepers, right? And so normally the gatekeepers in a large organization, it's different now. I mean, there's usually not a receptionist out front, or there's not a lot of support people. But back in the day, you had a receptionist, you had their assistant, you know, you had all kinds of people that helped you get that appointment, and would put you through to them when you called, instead of blocking you. And so, when you get the appointment, you go to see them. Oh, Beverly, thank you so much for all your help. Here's a little candy you can share, or whatever. Sometimes I'd try to find out what they liked, or when I worked at Avis, I'd take an Avis mug or something, and give it to them. And then when I got to the office, their assistant would come to get me. I'd give her a little something. And then when I would call again, it would be I would be able to get through to them,
Okay.
or they'd tell me what was going on. I mean, how many times is somebody you had a great presentation, they were really interested, and then they go call and you can't get them on the phone again, right? Or you can't get that second interview. So you can find out things that are going on from somebody else in the office. That's why.
That's a great tip, I would say. Thank you for that, Margye. I just saw in your LinkedIn profile you mentioned retention required relationship, increase engagement, increased revenues. Do you think building
Quick
relationship,
story.
building engagement?
I
So
when I was at
we see,
Avis,
building a
I
relationship and building an engagement is
one
so
of the
important in
one of the
such a role.
national, actually global, um, account reps assigned a several $1 million account to me because he wasn't calling on them, and I would see them all the time, and it was dragging down his portfolio, right? And so he thought, oh well, we'll just let her take care of it. And, it's never gonna close. Well, I started a relationship with the buyer, with this company, and and I always had that. I always kept up. I would send articles or whatever, thinking, I'm never going to get this, but we were on a committee together, and um, so I just stayed in touch. Well, one day something happened, and they had a fight with their vendor, with their car rental vendor, and they went out to bid. And suddenly we were in the game, and they called and asked us to bid because of the relationship that I'd built with the buyer. And this is over several years. And then it came down between us and another car rental company. everything was pretty identical, our pricing, everything else. They gave us the business. And my boss called him and said, you know, everything was pretty much equal. What, you know, what made you decide to give us your business? And he said, because I trust Margye to take care of us, because she took the time to create a relationship with me when she had no reason to believe that we would ever, ever, ever go to bed. And I closed a $1.5 million account because of my relationship. So retention requires relationship.
Envision well.
Envision Well. Well, Envision Well is a
Tell us about
About
Envision
health
Well.
Envision
tech
Well.
startup owned by a woman named Tam Williams. It's been around for about 5 years,
Envision Well.
but
Career profile.
actually only
Envision Well.
launched the app and website, etc., in November of 2019. And if you think about November 2019, it was not the best time to launch a business, right? So we worked really hard. And what I've done for TAM, which I've done for a lot of with several other companies, is TAM is Envision Well is a minority woman-owned business, and I work to leverage certification of these businesses as being minority or women-owned small businesses, to get them into corporations and accounts where it would take months or years for them to get into, because they're small. And so I've worked in business development for these small businesses. I always call myself the CEO whisperer, because it's a lot of fun to work with CEOs and help them, structure their sales departments and really understand how to grow their businesses. So Envision Well is a terrific business. There's a great app. It's the Envision Well app. You can get it on Google and Apple, and it basically gives you control of your own health and wellness. And there are some just amazing. There's some amazing technology in this app where I can go in and hold it in front of my face, and it will give me my blood pressure, my stress level, everything, using certain points on your skin. So terrific company. I highly recommend it. I recommend it for individuals. I recommend it for companies, because it's a great way for people to be able to control their own health and wellness. Okay. Okay.
Great. So I will anyway put all these details in the
Definitely,
show
I'll
notes.
be putting all these
Okay.
details in show notes.
Show notes.
So tell us
I will
about
be.
how you
I will mention
maintain
all
all
these
these years, your
details.
beauty
App
and the
You are
details,
confidence.
you are extremely kind.
job description. Yeah.
We talked about my
My
age the other day,
special
and
question
so
to you is
um,
how to
uh,
maintain a
and it's all right
joviality
to
and
mention it because I've been
confidence.
around a
So over to
really
you.
long time. I think it's I practice self-care, and I think confidence, it wavers a little bit when you head into your 40s and 50s, because you know you start to see a little ageism, especially in sales, and uh, so uh, you you push through, and you have to sort of dig deep inside yourself to be able to bring that out. And the story I didn't tell was when I was in the music business. Cher was on our label, and she came into Atlanta for a show, and she took the time to spend 20, 30 minutes with me and told me to always, always, always dig deep. Do not allow people to treat you in any way that you do not want to be treated. Stand up for yourself, brand yourself, and dig deep and bring that confidence out. And I've remembered that. I was in my 20s, my late 20s, when I met her, and I have carried that with me forever. And I've always been true to me, to my brand. I practice self-care, which is what we talk about at Envision Well all the time, and I work hard to help other women. And I think as long as you are giving, and my favorite phrase is give to get to give. So I give, I get, I give again.
Wow, that's amazing. So tell us your daily
One of
practice
my
for fellow
Wow,
members
amazing. Okay.
one of my
which help you in
bosses,
sales and your personal
um,
life.
So
when
what's
I
your daily
when I
practice
left
which helped
Avis,
you
sent
so
me
far in
an email,
sales as well
and it
as
was
in personal
rules for
life?
sales leadership success, and there were 10 of them, and I still have this email, and I keep it, and I read it, and uh, I it has it has been one of the greatest things, one of the greatest gifts that any one of my former colleagues or bosses has ever given me. The My leadership. So I read this. I make sure I'm doing the things that it says, and then I had one other little tidbit that is um, about writing or getting in touch with people, and I call it the 25s, and it's call 5 people that you haven't talked to in a while and catch up with them. Um, Handwrite 5 notes to people that you may not have talked to, or you may have, just following up or just reaching out. Handwritten notes, send handwritten notes. Um, Make 5 introductions of people to one another that might be helpful for them. So make at least 5 connections for other people. And then the other is make 5 cold calls, to introduce yourself to 5 people. And the other is talk to 5 friends or 5 family members. And if you do the 25s, um, you will be wildly successful. So I read my rules for leadership. I do my 25s, and I'm a notorious note writer, handwritten. I spend a lot on stamps.
What is your secret of success in one word or one line if you want to say?
One word. Um,
Wow,
Persistence.
great. Okay, okay, great. And
Never give up.
don't give up.
Okay,
Okay,
that's
good.
nice.
What's that
So,
you want?
what's your
Well, you
secret
have to
to
be kind of
balance
How
tough
work
you
life? I know
managed
you
your
have
work-life
children,
balance after,
and
so many
not
now
years?
feel
Being
grandchildren.
trained in
So, how do you
sales and
guilty
manage?
leadership
about
role, it's
Tell us
not that
about
working.
easy
that.
for a woman
Um,
Managing children and
so,
work.
you know,
What's your
yes,
what's your
if I was
experience
out
on
of
this?
town at some point and my one of my children needed me, that was hard. And back in the day, you just could talk to them on the phone. We didn't have Zoom or anything. Um, but I worked the whole time. I always worked. As a matter of fact, when my daughter was born and I had decided to leave that agency because they didn't promote me, um, I took her on a job interview and to a lunch job interview and set her up on the table. And she was like 2 weeks old. And so, about halfway through lunch, I said, "Excuse me," took her into the restroom, fed her because I was breastfeeding, came back out, put her back up on the table, and finished the interview. And I got hired. So you just do what you have to do. When I ran a travel agency and it snowed, a lot of my agents were women, and I had kids in Nashville. We'd have, and the schools were closed. Rather than lose my workforce for a day or two, I turned our conference room into a daycare center, and I had everybody brought their kids in, and I had them bring blankets and sleeping bags so they could nap, and um, I set up back in the day when we had brochures, and they used to make them walk around the table and stamp brochures, and the older ones, the little ones, had to have toys and all that kind of stuff. But you just do what you have to do, and you make it work. Now, I will say that my first husband wasn't all that enamored with it, so you know I moved on and got a second husband. So um, you know it's it's your decision. It's a life decision, and I don't believe in work-life balance. It's integration. So what you're doing is who you are, basically. And your children will learn that. I mean, and they will model those things. I can remember my daughter walking out with, I don't know, it was a little bag that she had, or lunchbox or something, and she put it by the front door, and I said, "What do you have there, honey?" She says, "I have my brew case. I'm going to work. I have my brew case," her briefcase.
Okay, so yeah, you're saying they learn from the parents, right?
Okay, so they
Agree with
just
you.
learn
So tell
from
us your volunteering work.
parents.
I really admire you for that because you did
um,
a lot of volunteering work.
So the
I
last
got that from my
question is
mom,
like I've seen a lot of volunteering work
and
on
my mom was a
your
feminist.
LinkedIn profile.
Um,
So
and my
you've done a lot
grandmothers
of
were,
sharing and giving and
um, and
volunteering
my great aunt
experiences. You have
and my aunts,
done a lot of
and
volunteering work.
so I come from
Make it out
a
also.
fairly strong group of women, and part of what that entails is that you give back, and so when we were growing up, we always did volunteer work with my mom, and when I was an adult, then I started doing it, and uh, but this uh, I've always wanted for women to be able to succeed, and so um, you know volunteering is one of the best ways, other than hiring and promoting women and working with women-owned businesses. That's the other way that I'm able to give back and to help women succeed. So that's why.
Thank you, Margie, whatever you have done so far, volunteering work for the community. So, what do you want to leave this planet?
You know, what legacy do I want?
Thank you for that.
Um,
Volunteering.
I, you know, I, I,
Thank you for that.
I don't really know.
So,
I guess
what is
I
that
would
you want to leave
like for
on this planet?
all of the women that I've
What is
come
the
in
thing that
contact with
you really want to leave
to
on this
to
planet?
or who I've mentored, or who have thought, that I help them in their lives, that they pay it forward and they continue to do that with their colleagues, with their children, and it doesn't have to be, that they say my name, but that they remembered that somebody, helped them and was there, when they needed, a hand, and that they continue to do that, that they make those connections for women. I mean, I make connections for women I don't even know. Um, but, if somebody calls me and says, so and so needs help, with this, I'm always happy to make that connection. And for men too, but, primarily for women. So I guess the legacy I want is that feeling of confidence and hope and assistance that that I hope I've given to a lot of women. So you know that's what I want to leave.
So we are end of the show. How you want people to reach out to you if they want to?
Um, they can reach me
Okay.
at
I'm sure that
they can
that
reach
is
me
happening, and
a couple of ways. They can reach
many
me
persons are
at
already creating it.
msolomon
And so we are
dot
end of the show.
dec
How
at
you want
gmail dot
people
com
to reach you out if they want to?
or msolomon at envisionwell.co.
Thank you, Margye. It's my honor to have you here, such a senior saleswoman. Such a pleasure talking to you and a lot of learnings. Thank you.
Thank you, um, Thilaga. I really appreciate you having me, and it's been a lot of fun.
Bye. Take care.